Psychologists of Reddit, have you ever been genuinely scared by a patient before? What's your story? A very sweet, mostly blind teenager who was going through his first psychotic break and had a love of martial arts, taekwondo if I remember correctly, was really, really good at it. He couldn't see and would practice kicks, and at one point, accidentally kicked one of the reinforced shatterproof windows in the quiet room. Think padded room without the padding. Turns out they were shatter-resistant. He destroyed it with that kick. Why those particular details? Because he would practice his kicks everywhere, was mostly blind, and the one time he flipped up to practice one and I was walking around the corner, it came literal centimeters from my face, and I felt the impact of it against the air, like a physical force bashing into my face. Sweetest kid in the world, he would have been horrified if it had connected. Because things would have broken. A lot of things. He also grabbed my arm once in a suddenly firm grasp and asked if I wanted to do taekwondo with him. No, I did not. Not a psychologist, but I used to work in a psych ward as security. We had this huge guy with schizophrenia detained in 1S, which is the ward for those who have been legally determined to be unfit and are not allowed to leave. When I say huge, I mean he was like 6'5", gigantic muscles, and he used to be an MMA fighter. Real nice guy when medicated, but when in psychosis, he was not someone you'd want to go toe-to-toe with. We would sometimes have to call police to help us deal with him. One officer would arrive, take a look at him and go, "Nope," and call for backup. So one day I was guarding the entrance to 1S. He was doing fairly okay, so he wasn't confined to his room and was allowed to walk around the supervised communal space. He puts down his magazine, goes into his room, and then walks out naked. Dude walks up to me, stands about an inch away, and looks down at me. I mean way down, as I'm only 5'3". He tells me he's leaving. I asked if he would like some shoes or a gown. He says no, he's leaving and I better step aside, so I did. You better believe I stepped the F*** aside and let him walk out. I followed him at a safe distance through the psych ward, where everyone basically pinned themselves against the wall to get away, and out into the parking lot while on the call with the cops. I can't leave the grounds, so once he was off hospital property, I could only inform the police to which way he was running, which was down into a heavily populated downtown core. Not even 15 minutes later, he comes back and walks back into the lobby of the ward and asks for me. He wants shoes, after all. Not a robe, but shoes. So I bring him shoes to prevent him from getting violent, and off he goes again as I repeat the process, following him to the edge of the grounds, and calling the cops. Cops bring him back and put him into his secure room. However, once he is in there, they are not allowed to restrain past a certain point. So the whole security team assembles, which is me and about 5 men. They decide I'm to hold a leg as I'm small, and legs are easier to restrain. So we go into the room in a triangle formation with me as the last to enter. He must have missed when I came in the door, because he started screaming that I was a shapeshifter and freaking out. It took us about 30 minutes of restraining him before he was medicated enough to calm down. Fast forward maybe 2 years later. I'm no longer security or live in the town, but I went for a metal show. I joked to friends that I was worried someone I had dealt with in the hospital might recognize me and have bad memories. Lo and behold, there is MMA fighter taking shots at the bar. Now I know that he shouldn't be drinking with his meds, but hey, it's been 2 years, and I don't know anything about his current health status, so whatever. I still tried to avoid him in case he remembered my shape-shifting. At one point, our lines to the bar coincided, and I ended up standing next to him. He looked up at me, looked down, and then looked back up and stared. Hard. I could tell he recognized me, but I could also tell that he was trying to figure out from where. The entire night I could see him lingering around me, staring with this befuddled expression on his face. I was a tad scared. I'm a therapist, but not a psychologist, if that matters. I used to work in a facility for kids and adolescents with pretty intense behavioral issues. Even when a client was aggressive, I was usually able to de-escalate them, and I generally didn't feel unsafe. In fact, most of the time I was concerned about their safety during outbursts. With one exception, I had a client that was pretty strong and prone to intense tantruming. This client was acting in a way that was unsafe, had a plan to seriously hurt another resident, I think. So I had to put them on restriction, within staff eyesight at all times. Their response was to run up to me and attempt to choke me. Luckily, the staff got there in time and prevented this kid from seriously hurting me. On another occasion, this same client also took apart their curtain rod in their bedroom and swung it at my head. I dodged in time. Oddly enough, this client and I had a pretty good relationship the other 99% of the time, and I generally enjoyed working with them. Clinical psychologist here. I used to work in a prison and did a parole evaluation for an inmate that was a high-ranking gang member in a national gang. By his account, he was the highest ranking in the state. In fact, he was placed in that prison to hold his people accountable and keep the peace. He had a long, violent record and was, in my opinion, a genuine psychopath. Part of the eval is discussing the crime and assessing remorse and whatnot. He was so clinical in his description of how he tortured and left this guy to D*E over an unpaid debt. Live by the sword, D*E by the sword, was his phraseology for the act, like it was nothing. He was also very nonchalant about his ability to take care of his business while inside. I believed him. He had only spent 18 months of his last 15 years outside of prison. My recommendation was not to parole him. There were various factors that I gave, and in the end the parole board went with my recommendation. So the part that actually scared me, this was my first parole eval, was this guy's ability to affect the world outside. He could have sent someone to my house if he wanted to. I had no doubt about that. More experienced psychologists told me not to worry about it, that he knew the score and wouldn't take it personally. I had a hard time buying it. I was running a long-term offender group a few months later and he was part of it. After the first group, I pulled him aside and asked if we were good. He smiled at me and told me not to worry. I did my job and he didn't blame me for writing what I did because it was true. He went on to be a really insightful and active group member. Clinical psychologist in training here. I've never been afraid, but my friend had a client once who made her extremely uncomfortable. Without revealing any information that could break confidentiality, I will say that he had issues with masturbating too much and not doing much else, and at one point asked my friend if they could watch porn together in the next session so he could show her what he does. At another time, he talked about his masturbation habits while touching his D***K through his pants a bit. Totally inappropriate behavior, obviously. This client had lots of other issues, but when these things came up, her supervisor took her off the case because it wasn't suitable for training and my friend didn't feel safe.